Good morning, afternoon, or evening, dear viewer, and welcome back to the Raving Madman podcast with me, your host, Jonathan K. Today we're going to be talking about a really important topic, coming to terms with your diagnosis. Fun fact, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 15, a year after my depression diagnosis, but I didn't know I was bipolar until I was 19. This isn't a case where my family and my psychiatrist hid it from me. In fact, I was told I was bipolar at 15. It was just phrased in a way I didn't want to understand. My therapist at the time, who I didn't have the best relationship with, reinforced my delusions that I was just depressed. We only worked on myself as though I was depressed. We never implemented strategies to handle manic episodes. And the truth is, I wasn't ready to hear I was bipolar at 15. I was barely able to rediscover it at 19. It's terrifying. I didn't have a good grasp on how I could live a life successfully with bipolar disorder, and I was scared that it would derail my future. So how did I find out I was depressed? Well, at the ripe old age of 19, I switched therapists. I was describing my symptoms to her, and she pushed back on my concrete resolve that I was just depressed. "Jonathan," she said, "these are symptoms of bipolar disorder. Now, that doesn't mean you don't go through depression, but you should check in with your psychiatrist to see if that's what you got, because you're on mood stabilizers, and bipolar people typically take those." So I checked in with my psychiatrist, and God bless her, she tactfully responded to my question with, "Yeah, John, we've known this. I've told you this. I keep telling you this. I'm not sure how you didn't know." I laughed a dry, joyless laugh and thought back to the 14-year-old me that had just gotten diagnosed with depression. Back then, I had thanked whatever higher power above that I hadn't been diagnosed with something like bipolar disorder. Now I had to adjust my thinking. Well, at least it isn't schizophrenia. That, my friends, is foreshadowing. To be honest, I didn't deal with my diagnosis in the healthiest way. As somebody that really struggled, I felt vindicated for some reason. I had thought about how prevalent depression and anxiety were, and thought that there was no way my experience could be so universally terrible. Finding out that I was bipolar, I felt, yeah, I did have it worse than people with depression and anxiety. Let me clarify this now. That's not how it works. People struggle to different extents with different disorders, and just because you have a disorder that's rarer than depression doesn't mean that those with depression don't suffer. But if that's what works in the meantime, if that's what gets you through the first stages of progressing towards acceptance, if it helps to think of yourself as uniquely going through it, then that's what matters. You will grow to sympathize those struggling with depression and anxiety, but there are unique elements to disorders with psychosis that can make it feel more hopeless than depression. What really got me was the permanence of bipolar disorder. When I was going through my first bout of serious depression, I clung on to the hope that one day I could beat it. That flew out the window when I realized I was stuck with struggling for the rest of my life. That is what destroyed me about having bipolar disorder. That can send you spiraling. That can kill. Whether you have bipolar disorder or something else chronic, I'm here to tell you your life isn't over, because that's what I thought when I was first diagnosed with it. So how do you come to terms with the realization that you'll never be able to beat your disorder, that the most you'll ever be able to do is subdue it and snuff it out when it comes back? How do you comprehend the fact that you'll never be able to have a moment of the neurotypicality that others experience, the normalcy that you so desperately crave? Well, it takes time. It can't be accomplished with a simple reframing of mindset. I mean, that's what you gotta do, but you still have a serious mental disorder, and it will take advantage of all of your fears and doubts. That's how I conceptualize it anyway. As an invading force that uses the fear and frustration of my situation as a cudgel to wriggle its way into my brain. As the great Green philosopher Yoda once said, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. By thinking of it as some extraterrestrial parasite, I realized that what I have to do is starve it. That doesn't mean ignoring the fears and the doubts. In fact, that's how they grow. They metastasize when you aren't paying attention to them. Imagine them as seeds that grow when you don't pay them any mind. Because that's when the thing comes to nurture them in the background and feed upon them when they're ripe. You have to constantly root out your fears and doubts to keep it at bay. And that is exhausting. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not easy to be constantly vigilant of your negative emotions and have to address them whenever they crop up. It's the kind of mundane slog that wears away at your commitment to it or eases you into a false sense of security when you've been doing it for a while and think you can do it on autopilot. Again, though, there's the silvery, glowy lining that if you can keep at it, if you can dedicate yourself to it, you will be in a substantially better place. You'll be able to recognize the rumblings of an episode before they occur. You'll be able to implement strategies to mitigate and, in time, prevent the damage an episode can wreak upon your life. That ain't easy, but it is possible. And I lied earlier. While it's hard, very hard, you can get to and maintain that neurotypicality, that stability, that normalcy for extended periods of time. And while you may not be able to feel that way forever, while there may be times where you have to fight off episodes, normal people aren't stable all the time either. We all got our stuff, as my family likes to say. And while ours is especially bad, what you're not missing out on is a perfect headspace, because that doesn't exist for anyone. By doing the legwork to get better, by implementing strategies and patterns of thinking that protect against the damage of a mental attack, you can actually achieve a healthier headspace than the average person. That, though, is true for everyone with a chronic mental disorder. For people with psychosis, there's another aspect to this. At 21, I was diagnosed with schizoaffective bipolar disorder, and that thought rang in my head again. Thank Bruce Almighty I don't have schizophrenia. The last time my prayers were reversely answered, I felt doomed. This time, I came to the realization that I was schizoaffective on my own, and when it was confirmed by psychiatrists that that indeed was my diagnosis, I primarily felt shame. Ashamed that I had those thoughts in the first place. Ashamed to be me, to be born wrong, to be so plagued and defective. Suddenly, a ticking clock sprouted above my head. I couldn't see the number on it, but I knew what it was counting down to. Not to the day that I would kill myself. That was an uncertainty. That was something I could stave off. No. The clock was counting down to the day that I went crazy. That's the hardest part about coming to terms with a psychotic diagnosis, I think. The looming specter of psychosis. It's the fear of it that the psychosis itself uses to worm its way in. If you let it consume you, let it preoccupy your thoughts like I did, you're writing a self-fulfilling prophecy. Ironically, despite having to weed out all the other doubts and fears and negative thoughts that plague us, the fear of psychosis has to be treated differently. Not to dive too deep into analogy here, but I liken the fear of psychosis to the light of an anglerfish. Typically, the fears and doubts and negative thoughts need to be addressed before psychosis has the chance to feed upon them. By trying to snuff out this fear, psychosis is actually drawing you closer. The other negative thoughts, the other lights need to be smothered. They need to go out. But if you ruminate on this fear, hover too close to this light, psychosis will swallow you whole. So how does one move past the countdown? Because I'm not a liar. Chances are, if you have a disorder with psychotic features, you will go into another episode. Even with medicine, even with treatment, the countdown still ticks. The answer lies in radical acceptance. Accepting that there will be times where you go through psychosis, but that there are things you can do that can make those episodes shorter and less intense. Appreciating the moments where it's not there, but not cherishing them, because normalcy can be your status quo. Knowing that the countdown is above your head, that no matter what you do, it will eventually hit zero, but having the resiliency to reset it anyway. Over time, that clock will hit zero less and less frequently, but that takes work. The thing you really gotta know about having a psychotic disorder is that you've got some work to do. A lot of it, in fact. But it is some of the most incredible, rewarding work you can ever do in your life. You will see results. You will feel results. You are not hopeless. You don't have to go crazy forever. You are not doomed. You can live a normal life. More than that, you can fulfill your dreams. Yes, you do have a psychotic disorder, and you can be stronger for it. You can be better for it. You will have moments of weakness, times where things seem hopeless and awful, but your status quo normal will, if you work your heart out, be exceptional. Not just okay, not just alright, not just normal, exceptional. I know you can do it. And with that, this is the Raving Madman, Jonathan K., signing off. I'll see you soon.